This is Bike Maryland's 2025 legislative recap. I am Peter Gray, the chair of the board of Bike Maryland. And Bike Maryland, as you all know, is advocating for better biking and walking throughout the state of Maryland. We're now 26 years old, and we do advocacy with state and local governments, universities, businesses, communities to make biking a safe form of transportation, fun, recreational opportunity for all. We spent a lot of time in Annapolis advocating for policies and funding and legislation. This year, the session ended on April 7th, and there were several bills that we supported that passed both chambers and were signed into law by the governor. The priority bills that we had, only one passed both houses, bikes on sidewalks, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, but that basically makes it legal throughout the state for anyone to ride a bike on a sidewalk, which is people are usually doing because it's safer than being in the street. The law had been that it was illegal everywhere unless the local jurisdiction permitted it. And so Montgomery, I think Prince George's, Anne Arundel, Howard, a few other counties, Baltimore City. Actually, Baltimore City didn't have a law. Allowed biking except in certain central business districts. There were four bills that only passed the House: Bike Safety Yield or Stop as Yield, the Transportation Climate Alignment Act, 2025 Vulnerable Road User Enhanced Safety Act, and Bicyclist Safety Start. So we'll get into what those bills might have done if they had passed. So bikes on sidewalks, I already noted. This House Bill 628 was this bill that was vetoed by the government. It put some priority on constructing sidewalks, mostly in certain areas of the state. There was also a bill that allowed for graduated speed camera fines as opposed to just having a flat, like say a $40 fee if you were 12 miles an hour or over. This, in certain situations, allows for if you're speeding 100 miles over, then your fine is probably hundreds of dollars. So to be able to sort of measure the harm that's being done by the speeder and putting the penalty accordingly. And then there were some local bills in Baltimore City, in Montgomery, and Prince George's County that had mostly to do with either stop sign enforcement or speed cameras in one way or another. And those are bills that also passed that were sent to the governor. So bikes on sidewalks, I basically told you about it, but this is something that had taken a few years to get through both houses. It had passed the House of Delegates a couple times, and then this year finally got a vote in the Senate and passed easily, bipartisan. Everybody thought this was a good idea. And so this is something that Delegate Jones and Senator Waldstreicher have been sponsoring for a couple of years, and we were very happy to get this through. And one of the big benefits in my mind is that the police no longer have the right to just pull somebody over for doing something that is the safest thing to do. Be on the sidewalk when being in the street is not perceived of as safe.
Just to add a bit of color, Peter, at the 11th hour this session, the bill was named Jay's Law in honor of Delegate Jay Jacobs, who is his district's on the Eastern Shore, who told a heart-wrenching story 3 years ago when the bill was first introduced about biking on the sidewalk in Rock Hall, Maryland, and the sheriff taking his bike away.
When he was a child.
When he was 7 years old. And so he has advocated for this bill from the get-go, and he was presented with a balance bike one year at the end of the session, and they named the bill for Delegate Jacobs.
So, again, this is something where we had all the policy, whatever, in our favor, and it still was a mighty struggle to get a vote in the Judicial Proceedings Committee just because they have so many bills and this didn't necessarily seem like such a priority, but we had secured a commitment from the chair of that committee before the session to bring this and another bill to a vote. And so we were happy that it got a vote and of course passed easily once it got that committee vote. HB 628, so this instructed M.SHA to prioritize projects that either streets where the jurisdiction had a complete streets policy or some sort of Vision Zero plan. And it allowed SHA to fully fund the cost of acquiring the right of way of the sidewalk or bike path project, where they saw either there was a high crash rate around there or some other significant public safety risk. And it passed overwhelmingly, but clearly, at least it seems to me that SHA thought that they never like it when the legislature tells them how to do their jobs. Number one. Number two, I think they were worried about this being a very large economic drain on their resources. And so they convinced the governor to veto it, much to our surprise. So graduated speed camera fines. This is a statewide bill. Delegate Stewart and Senator Waldstreicher. It passed pretty much along party lines, but it allowed for graduated fines where there's automated enforcement. So again, instead of just having a one base fine, one of the things that sort of helped bring this forward was that last year, right before the 24 session, there was a crash on, I think it was 695, but I can't remember, that killed a bunch of workers, people doing construction work on the stretch of road. And so in the 24 session, they very quickly passed and had signed into law a bill that allowed for graduated fines in work zones. And I think that precedent helped get this passed. It also mandated that SHA has to convene a work group on best practices for speed monitoring systems in school zones. And I think that that's what this is focused on, if I'm not mistaken. So that's good. We want automated traffic enforcement. We feel is a very positive thing. You don't have the friction, racial or otherwise, that comes with a lot of in-person stops. But it allows for the penalty to fit the crime, so to speak. That if you're, it's one thing if you're going 15 miles over the speed limit. If you're going 40 or 50 or more, that's a much dangerous thing and you should pay a heavier fine. So that is what is the case now throughout the state in school zones. Next slide, please. So these are these local laws that I was mentioning earlier. Baltimore now has allows for automated enforcement at stop signs in school zones in the city of Baltimore. And again, it's one of the things that has always struck me about Maryland is it's very piecemeal. The legislature is reluctant to pass statewide things, wanting the local jurisdictions to have a lot of say over what happens. But there are a lot of state roads, and so it's kind of a mixed thing there. But this at least allows the city of Baltimore to place cameras at stop signs in school zones and use that to levy fines. In Montgomery County, this was focused on the high injury network, and it allows speed cameras on streets that have been identified as having a lot of crashes with injury or death. And it also mandates that the fines are to be used for study, design, and construction of safer street projects on those streets where the crashes take place. So how granular that will be, I guess it'll sort of be up to the county, but this allows sort of a wider use of automated traffic enforcement and mandates that instead of the money just going to the treasury in general, that that money will be used for safer street measures on those high-risk streets. And then finally, the other local bill here is Prince George's County. This is a bill that I think is in its third or fourth attempt to pass the legislature. So-called Indian Head Highway or Piscataway Highway, Maryland 210, is a truly frightening road to drive on. And again, they only had sort of a $40 fine, no matter how fast you're going. So this allows for graduated fines on that stretch of road. That has seen, I think, I want to say in either 5 or 10 years, there's been 95 crash deaths. We did a memorial a couple years ago for a cyclist that was crossing that road. And even just driving on it is a little disturbing. So that's hopefully will incent people not to speed or to speed less on that stretch of road. Next slide. So again, back to the ones that only pass the House. So bicycle safety yield or stop as yield, Idaho stop, whatever you want to call it. Transportation Climate Alignment Act, and then I'll talk about that a little bit more. This is something where we worked in a very large coalition, a lot of environmental groups like Sierra, unions. This is something that has passed the House the last 2 years. It almost passed the Senate last year, and then it didn't get a vote this year. But so that's the TCA. The Vulnerable Road User Enhanced Safety Bill, there is a law that defines who a vulnerable road user is, and it's obviously everybody walking and biking, but there's some other, anybody in a wheelchair. I think there's a few, I think on scooters. This would, instead of, well, the state of the law now is if you cause a crash as a car driver and either kill somebody or seriously injure them, right now, in most instances, the only penalty you can get is a financial one. But this law would have allowed for up to 2 months of incarceration. And then the one below that, no stopping, standing, or parking in a bike lane. It's just what it sounds like. If there's a bike lane, a painted lane, a cycle track, whatever, it would not have allowed any motor vehicle to stop and block that lane, which of course causes anybody on a bike trying to use that lane to go into the lane where cars are. There was some progress in the House. There were some amendments that we thought kind of swallowed the whole purpose of the law, would have allowed, like, say, for instance, loading trucks to stop for up to half an hour. It just didn't seem like a good bill at the end. And so we may try again with that. And then bicycle safety start is if you're at an intersection where the walk sign becomes green before the green light for the cars. In other words, a leading pedestrian interval where pedestrians can enter the intersection. This would have allowed the same treatment for bikes. And I think that is the state of law in the District of Columbia. So next slide, please. Why did these bills stall in the Senate? That's the $64,000 question. So again, bike safety yield would allow bikes to treat stop signs as yield signs and keep the bikes, you approach a stop sign intersection, there's nobody coming perpendicular to you, nobody's making a left in front of you. There might be a car sort of approaching from behind. And this way, by being able to just slow down, assess the intersection and go through, you're safer because you stay ahead of that car that's behind you. The National Highway Traffic Safety Association Administration and the state provided a lot of data and information. MDOT wrote, I think, a 6-page letter. This is something that we had the chair of the Judicial Proceedings Committee in the Senate, Will Smith, as a sponsor, and Regina Boyson Vaughn Stewart in the House. As it had last year, it passed the House easily. Last year in 24, we didn't even get a vote in JPR, that Senate committee. This year we got a vote, but it ended up being an 8-3 unfavorable. And some of the votes that were negative were ones that kind of surprised us. And we have to think long and hard about what our strategy is if we bring this back. But again, this is a safety measure. It's something that there's data. For instance, the state of Delaware passed this a few years ago. They did an analysis of crash data at stop sign intersections involving bikes and saw a 25% reduction from 3 years before the bill passed to 2 or 3 years after. So it's clear that this, is something that should make cyclists safer, but it seems very counterintuitive to a lot of people, especially people who never bicycle. And all they think about is, why are those bikes, just blowing through the stop signs? So this is something where we have a lot of work to do in order to get it passed. Next
Peter,
slide.
if I could, I'll just add,
Sure.
it failed in Senate JPR committee 8-3. Essentially, we need to convince 3 of those senators that this is safer. And we know there are a couple of them that are probably so hard over that will never be convinced, but we think there are some that that could be convinced. I will tell you that I'm meeting with my own Senator Henson, who voted against this in a week or two, and so we're gonna work this off session and try to bring some folks around. I'll also say that Senator Love, who is not the sponsor, but is now on the Judicial Proceedings Committee, having been a delegate in Environment and Transportation, and really a great advocate for vulnerable road user safety in general, really advocated strongly for this in the committee hearing and then in the committee voting session. So yeah, for any of you in Montgomery County, she really did an amazing job advocating for this. But as Peter said, we've got more work to do if we're going to try to bring it back next
Yeah,
year.
and one of the things, and if anybody has anybody on a local level in law enforcement that you can sit down and talk with who would be willing to support this, I think that would send a strong signal to the senators that this is something that is legit and is not just something that's allowing bikes to be above the law. I will also add that Senator Love and Delegate Corman, who's the chair of the Environmental Transportation Committee, are going to be at World of Beer in Bethesda on Monday the 16th from 5 to 7 to talk about all these things. And so if you want to stop by, we're going to provide some snacks, and that should be a fun evening. So next slide, please. So the Transportation Climate Alignment Act, again, this is the second year that it has been introduced. And what it would do is it would require if there is a project, highway expansion project, that's going to cause increases in greenhouse gas emissions, vehicle miles traveled, and the project is over a $5 million, oh no, over $100 million project. It would start at 5 and jumped up during the session. It would require MDOT to measure those increases and to create mitigation projects that would, mitigate, that would sort of offset that increase from the highway project. And those can be expanding access to mass transit, building bike lanes, putting housing um, near jobs.
It'll wait, Peter.
Um, so it would allow for, we would see as good projects to at least offset the mitigation of these projects. It's not clear why it didn't get a vote in budget and taxation. It didn't get over to the Senate until kind of late in the session. And I think they just sort of ran out of time because it had actually gotten 2 floor votes on the Senate the year before. And advocates worked a lot with MDOT to make sure that they were on board and liked this bill. And so I think it's definitely going to come back. And even though we're not the big entity in the advocacy group, we think it's important to try and get this kind of balance into state planning when they build these big projects. And this is Delegate Mark Edelson has been the primary proponent, but Senators Hettleman and Jile were co-sponsors this year. Vulnerable Road User Enhanced Safety Act. So as I said, there was a vulnerable road user law that passed in 2021. And last year, the Sarah Debbick Langenkamp Memorial Act allowed for incarceration penalties up to 2 months of penalty for anybody who crashed into and either seriously injured or killed a bicyclist in a bike lane. This would generalize that idea so that if you're driving your car and you cause a crash, involved in a crash that caused serious injury or death of a vulnerable road user, you don't just get away with the fine, you might also have to go to prison for up to 2 months. So it passed easily in the House. But again, it went to Senate JPR and didn't get a committee vote. And, we don't have any specific notion that anybody was against this. It's just that it ran out of time. And so I think that's that hopefully we'll have a better experience with that next year. And Senator Love, I'm sure, is ready to be a sponsor again. And maybe it's something that where we should have it go to the Senate first. I don't know. We have to think about how that will work in 26. No stopping standing. So again, there's lots of places where cars aren't supposed to stop. Here's a good example of an Amazon truck in a bike lane. And the danger that it poses to people on bikes. Like all these other bills, it passed pretty easily in the House. But the amendments that took place in the House sort of upended the purpose of the bill. And so we didn't really push it in the Senate. And so, again, it would allow Amazon, delivery drivers to stop for 30 minutes. We were considering the idea of what we thought would be an okay amendment, which is that if a disability access service like Metro Access in the DC region had to stop and pick somebody up and had to stop in a bike lane, that seemed acceptable. That doesn't, you're talking about a minute or two. But everybody else, I mean, in the city of Baltimore, it is the law that if you're in a car, you're not allowed to stop at all in a dedicated bike facility. So we'll have to see about how we proceed with this and who we get to sponsor it. But again, it's the Judicial Proceedings Committee we have to have a strategy to get it through that obstacle. Bicycle safety start. I explain this again, this intersection has a leading pedestrian interval. The little green man shows up while there's still a red for the cars. And this would allow not just pedestrians to go forward into the intersection, but bikes, which again, like bike safety yield, would keep the bike ahead of the car, or if a car was going to make a left, it would allow it to get into the intersection, not have to wait for that car to make the left. Passed the House without a negative vote, but it didn't pass the House until after crossover day. And so it went to the Senate Rules Committee and it died there. So hopefully we'll get this pre-filed in both houses with a Senate co-sponsor. And I think that hopefully that'll mean that it goes through pretty easily through both houses, because I don't think anybody has any reason to oppose this or think that this is something that is bad policy. So there were a couple of bills that basically went nowhere. I can speak more to the contributory negligence. Contributory negligence is a doctrine that Maryland and 4 deep South states are the only states in the union that have contributory negligence as the law of the land. And basically what that does is if you're on your bike and you're involved in a crash, and let's say you're 1% at fault, your bike sort of went over a little bit onto the line of the bike lane you were in or whatever. But the sort of the insurance verdict is, you had a little bit to do with why that crash happened. Today, if that happens in Maryland, the cyclist, no matter what the injuries are, or what the economic loss is, recovers nothing. In other words, if you contribute to the crash, then you're seen as being liable and therefore not worthy of recovery. So again, we tried to craft a law like in DC, where they also have contributory negligence, to make a carve out for vulnerable road users. And we had a good hearing in the House Judiciary Committee, but it didn't seem like the chair was very committed to it. And the bill went nowhere and it didn't get over to the Senate. So I think we'll try again. One of the problems is that where you would think that the Trial Lawyers Association might be in favor of this, I think they saw this as creating risk for other legal doctrine, and they testified against it. And so nobody was really convinced to sort of take this up. And of course, the insurance industry was very, very much against this. And I think, we don't need to convince them, but we need to convince other people in civil society, various groups, that this is a fair way to have comparative negligence as opposed to contributory negligence be the operating doctrine. So
Peter, I'll just add that
Yeah.
Chair Clippinger was not present at the committee hearing for this. So we know he was maybe somewhat skeptical This is sort of what we heard going in, but he was not even present. He had not because he was avoiding this. He just had some
things to do.
conflicting appointment.
So we need to sit down with him, and we need to see who else we can convince, what other groups we can get to support this, because the insurance company is an important industry in the state of Maryland. And even though this doctrine makes absolutely no sense from a logical point of view, it is the law now, and the system works for the insurance companies, because they don't have to make payouts. And so we have to overcome that resistance by them.
But
Peter,
somehow it works fine in 46 states.
Yeah.
Mhm. And it raises the question, if you don't mind taking one on Mike, are there differences looking beyond auto insurance to the willingness of insurance providers to insure Marylanders as a result of
Oh,
this? Like, are there bike insurance companies that refuse to carry Marylanders? Is there a competing narrative to tell about business opportunities lost insuring us?
maybe. I mean, it's interesting. We could look at the DC experience and see if there's any change that took place because of the change in the law. But like John said, I don't think that that's the issue. I think that the system works fine in 46 other states. Maybe the insurance companies make a little less money. I can't believe that's really the issue. I think they just want to sort of keep the status quo and not upset the apple cart.
And
But
just to be clear,
yeah.
I was asking if there are any providers of insurance to cyclists that refuse to insure in
Because of
Maryland as a
Maryland's
result
doctrine.
of the existing law.
Well, I haven't come across those entities that will insure cyclists for cycling behavior. I know that a lot of people, in terms of loss, theft of a bike, will try and get their homeowners insurance to cover that. But I don't know. It's a good question. I don't know if I've never heard of cycling behavior insurance. Like
I
the
also,
driver behavior
yeah,
insurance.
and not to belabor the point, final question, but I wonder if like Maryland and WABA could identify insurance providers that would specifically offer products to fill the gap left by contributory negligence in Maryland.
Well, it's an interesting question. I mean, I'm sure for money, they will do it. I don't know what the terms would be. And again, there's no sort of groundswell of demand for that insurance product. So
And
that's mostly
mostly just curious so that we can hold it up as a straw man to demonstrate what the cost of the exposure to risk currently is. But admittedly, it'll be a little bit of a stretch. But thank you.
Sure. Safe alternative routes to public schools. Oh, right. So this basically was something that a whole bunch of members of the House, including Doug Charkoudian from Southern Montgomery County, and we had some Senate sponsors also, would have required every school board to prepare a report card about students that have to walk to school, basically creating a requirement for school boards to have a safe route to school plan for every school that they oversee, and then publish that report on the county's website. And if something is found not to be safe, to actually build out so that it is safe. I am not surprised that this didn't make much progress because I think the potential costs are enormous. I think policy-wise, it's the right thing to do. For instance, Montgomery County has a Vision Zero plan, but because of the cost issue, the requirement in the latest iteration of the plan said that they had to make sure to create safe routes to school plans for 5 schools a year. There's there's a couple hundred schools or 300 schools in Montgomery County. And so, you're not going to reach your Vision Zero goal by creating plans for 5 schools a year. So again, this was kind of a big swing, but it did not make much progress in either house. So what are we going to do next year? And John, feel free to chime in here. We have to come up with a list of priority bills. WABA's actually having a meeting with the State Highway Administrator tomorrow. And one of the things we're going to talk about, and there's going to be some people from MDOT, from the Secretary's office there as well. We're going to start this conversation about bills that we might introduce next year and what can they support and what do they want from us that they would support. For instance, there was a bill that would have allowed SHA to lower speed limits 5 miles an hour without having to do a costly engineering speed study. That did not make any progress in either house. But we want to create a list of bills for next year, including some that from last year, but we would love to have some new ideas as well. We need to talk to key legislatures on the 2 committees that we deal with most, environmental and transportation in the House and judicial proceedings. Don't ask me what this R stands for. In the Senate, we are going to have conversations with MDOT, the Department of Natural Resources, both of them about trails, and MDOT about on-road stuff, and MDTA about bridge crossings. We have meetings that start in late December usually, and anybody who wants to make sure they get invited to that bill should send me or anybody else on the Bike Maryland board an email. I'm chair@bikemd.org. So that's a way to get involved. And we're also going to try and have during the sort of the fundraising season in the summer and fall, go to some events where delegates and senators are to talk to them about these things, but mostly to try and set up specific meetings about this. And also we have posted on the webpage, and we'll talk about it periodically about how we did get a few things through the legislature last year, bikes and sidewalks, these local bills. One of the conversations that we want to have with sort of our best supporter, proceedings, yes, but why is it an R? Is Sarah Love, and she has some qualms about speed cameras, and we'd like to sort of talk to her about that and see if there's a way to get her to be in favor of what is a fairly low cost safer street measure, which is automated traffic enforcement. It's very restrictive where you can put speed cameras. Most local jurisdictions don't have them at all. And so we would like to see that happen. And, and to sort of cheer on the efforts of SHA in making safer street projects happen, to try and get them to put more money into the budget on those things. But in terms of legislation, to sort of have these conversations more in advance so that when we have a bill that we've settled on that we want to support, that we make sure that there are sponsors in each house and that the bill gets pre-filed, because that just makes it easier at the beginning of the session. And sort of think about how we need to approach the Judicial Proceedings Committee in a different way. And so, John, you want to chime in?
Yeah, I'll chime in just a couple of points. One is 2025 was a especially challenging Maryland legislative session for two obvious big reasons. One is budget, the $3 billion shortfall, and the other is the federal chaos that was such a big overhang. And so, it's always a crazy, frenetic 90-day session, but I think with those two things looming over the session, it was a particularly challenging session. Second thing I would say is, as Peter's alluded to this, there's a coalition of advocacy groups from across Maryland that work together under the leadership of Bike Maryland. And that coalition has gained in strength over the years, in my view. I've been at this for 10 or 11 years and is working quite effectively. Each of us that work at the local level bring our local relationships, which are quite helpful. So I just want to mention that coalition is pretty much statewide and has worked really well. Third point is our collaboration with MDOT and SHA. That also has grown over the years, and it has changed as leadership has changed in Maryland and in MDOT in particular, and it has worked exceptionally well this past year. There's a lot of transparency. We work together. We meet on specific bills. They have supported bills that where in the past they might have otherwise stayed on the sideline or possibly even opposed. So our level of collaboration and trust with our state counterparts, mainly at MDOT, to some degree, certainly at SHA, to some degree at DNR, has worked really, really well. And then the fourth thing I'll say is the Maryland Bike Symposium, which is typically in February. If you've not, I know some of you I recognize have attended over the years. If you've not, I encourage you to attend once that date is set. It's typically a morning of programs and networking, followed by meetings with constituents and legislators. Those meetings are set up in advance when you register, and it's just a great opportunity to have a big presence down there.
So
Now I'll mention Lifeline too, if
sure.
So I'll put my own plug in for the bike for Bike AAA in Anne Arundel County. We have our signature bike event, the Anne Arundel County Lifeline 100s, on October 5th. It's our 11th year. Rides for every age, every ability: children, people with special needs, people in spandex, people not in spandex, road bikes, trikes, adaptive bikes, you name it, something for everybody. Lifeline100.com. End of infomercial.
So there's a couple questions in the chat. I will sort of try, and if there's time in this meeting that we have with Administrator Pines tomorrow, sort of poke around to see if they have anything to say about that veto. I do suspect that both the administrator and a couple people in the secretary's office were worried about the economic impact, the spending impact of that HB 628. And so I think that's what caused the veto, but that's just a theory on my part. I don't think the bikes on sidewalks is gonna, like Nigel said, I don't think it's gonna have a direct impact, but I'll tell you, a piece of legislation that we had championed in the 24 session was to create a trails program, and it had all sorts of bells and whistles with it, and it didn't progress. But what happened is MDOT decided to start its own effort on trails and has been having periodic meetings with people from the community, etc. And it's a effort to create trails that will be used for transportation, not just recreation. And so that is sort of moving along slowly, but I'm hoping by the end of this year, there'll be some sort of more concrete report and sort of help the effort to get more transportation options for bikes and to get more trails in general in the state of Maryland. But we need to, I think the biggest need we have is for us to organize, 20, 30 times the number of people that we have now to verbalize, to communicate that they want these things happening in their jurisdictions all over the state. And we're making progress towards that. Bike Maryland is in a much better situation financially and otherwise than it was a few years ago. We are doing things like this webinar. Next week, we're doing a bike packing webinar. We're trying to provide some things outside the legislative session that are just educational in nature. Hopefully, probably not this year, but maybe next year, we'll put on a ride ourselves. And I think that we need to just mobilize a lot more people in our communities to, particularly during the legislative session, but also off session, to convince the decision makers that this is something that is going to make them more popular, not less popular, and that they're going to get people out of cars, and that they're going to give people more options to move around recreationally, and that there'll be much, much more on-road bike infrastructure on state highways so that people can be safe going from one point to another. The last thing I want to say is that the bridge on the WBNA trail, which is in Prince George's and Anne Arundel counties, the bridge over the Patuxent River is there. You can use it. We think sometime in July, there's going to be a weekday ribbon cutting. And Bike Maryland and Bike AAA and WABA are all trying to organize a group ride from various points arriving at the bridge. And we're thinking about doing something that's independent of the ribbon cutting as well, so that people who work for a living during the week can also enjoy a group celebration of this wonderful new facility that actually makes it possible for me to think that I could ride mostly off-road from Silver Spring all the way to Annapolis. And my goal is to provide testimony, but come and go on my bike. So we'll see if I'm able to achieve that next session. But how close is the Lifeline 100 route to this bridge, John?
Actually, some portion of it's fairly close. But we don't actually utilize the WBNA trail on the routes. We do use the BNA trail and a bit of the BWI trail.
So hopefully, in 5 years or whatever, that we can get all these trails to connect to one another, and make it so that somebody on one, where I'm sitting in the southern part of the state, or central part of the state, can bike to Baltimore and not take my life in my hands and not have to ride on busy car-dominated streets. So lots of work to do. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Well, we recorded this, so we will put this on the Bike Maryland website. I, of course, encourage all of you to give any amount of money to Bike Maryland. That'll make you a member and get you some minor benefits. Sean, you had a question.
Yeah, easy one. On the safety stuff, on the Idaho stuff, I am curious if the specific point was raised with the legislators that DC moving as far ahead of us as they have creates just a genuinely confusing situation right along the state line.
Mm,
And the state line is a very busy urban area like Tacoma Park, or at least a very busy suburban area like Tacoma Park, where this is highly relevant. Was it? And if not, willing to help in the next session.
we didn't make that point specifically. We were just sort of thinking that the logic of the situation and all the support we were getting from various authoritative sources would be enough. I think that that's a good point to raise with particularly members of the Prince George's County delegation. I think the folks in southern Montgomery County are already supportive of this bill, and it really is, you know, a few senators that held this up in the Judicial Proceedings Committee. And those are the folks that we need to, at least in the first instance, focus on. But I think that, you're making a good point, but I think that unless you are someone that uses your bike for transportation, that's not going to seem very important or salient. But the delegates who have districts on the DC line, I'm sure that that is something that would resonate with them, because even if they don't bike, they have a lot of constituents that do and bike into the district on a daily basis.
Thanks, Peter.
Sure. So Mike, that's actually a good idea. I think that um, it would be nice if we could get all these people to ride a bike, but I don't know that that's going to be possible for some of them, because it's not, a lot of people stop riding bikes when they're kids and never want to go back to it. But like John said, we did post a video. Bike More makes, which is the Baltimore City bike advocacy group, did a excellent video of this. And I think it's really, I mean, it is about logic, but it's really about getting certain members of that committee to just sort of say, oh, that's what you're talking about. Oh, yeah, this really, to get them to feel that it makes sense. And then it's not just a giveaway to cyclists. They don't like the Bike More one because it's from Baltimore City. I don't know. I thought it was a pretty good video. But these things are very emotion driven sometimes in the Senate. And again, we have huge amounts of support and success in getting these sort of policy things through the House of Delegates. And we need to switch something up in our strategy, maybe to try and go through the Senate first. I don't know. And our supporters in the House are way more passionate than our supporters in the Senate. So, that's just something we have to deal with. And we have to organize those people in those districts to start bugging their senators to say, hey, I don't like the fact that you voted against this last year. I want you to vote for it this year. That's really what will ultimately be the most successful strategy to change votes, I think. Anybody else? Well, thank you everybody for coming. We really appreciate your doing this. Yeah, I know we are the all-powerful Bike Levy. But no, as one delegate told me a couple years ago, they said the first order of business in the House is abolish the Senate. Well, it's not going to happen. Senate has it has a different culture, And the Judicial Proceedings Committee deals with a whole raft of issues, transportation and non-transportation, legal, all these different things. And so they always have too much to do. And we just have to figure out a way to get to the top of the voting line. Yeah, I think that's right.
Thanks,
Yes.
Peter. Thanks, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.